All right, I'm going to read you some Buddy Wakefield today. This is a big, thick book of poetry, and it's not his only one. If you may know Buddy Wakefield, he's a pretty famous poet at this point in time. But I got the pleasure of seeing Buddy Wakefield a couple of years ago, which actually was my introduction to him. So maybe you don't know Buddy Wakefield, but a friend of mine took me to see one of Buddy's live performances, and I have to tell you, it was amazing. Like, I really couldn't actually believe what I had witnessed. I was just so engaged, and my heart was beating, and like I really felt like I'd been taken out of myself into some really eternal place, which I think is the most amazing thing that a live performance can do for you, whether it's music or it's poetry or it's theater. And I know we're not getting to do a lot of that these days with the pandemic, but it's, I think it can happen over the digital planes. Also, I've done some workshops that have been pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Transcendental. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. But at any rate, Buddy Wakefield was an amazing experience. And last I heard, he had gotten out of the biz in a way and was writing screenplays. But I have a feeling that touring poets, I mean, like Buddy Wakefield toured for like 5 years straight or something like that or more. And I have a feeling that that might be something touring poets say all the time. That's it. I'm done. I'm out of this game, this rat race. But if you ever have the chance, Buddy Wakefield is just, he's healing. He's somebody who gets on the stage and their soul, something comes through them, and they heal you with their voice and with their stories and with the way they string words together. So he's an amazing performer, but he's really just pretty extraordinary with words, and he clearly writes a lot. And like I said, he has a lot of books. But this is Buddy Wakefield from A Choir of Honest Killers. So I'm going to just read you a couple of pieces from this today. So this one is titled Missoula Got Ugly. Bridget, the bartender at Brooks and Brown's on the flip side of the front entrance to the Holiday Motel on Patey Street in Missoula, Montana, told me an old Catholic saying once that went something like this: "You cannot let the sun set on being pissed." This is my failure. There is a pattern I have worn into my pillow with bad days. There's a street lamp, so sick of shining on pavement, an impatient plaster cast of kindness drizzled in the efforts of a greedy moth. Don't just stand there with your hand on the kill switch, watching like a wasted wish. Turn me off. I have so much blood when I wake up. It rumbles under my eyes. A stampede of blazing horse rabies barreling toward my threshold. Put your head into my plunging chest. If you still don't believe they are constantly coursing through my hiding spots, they find me breathing too loud. I have been pulled out by the ankles. I have been strung up by the brains. In these bones, it is my understanding that whatever suffering is left of me when I die will translate and travel with me. On days like today, it's the only reason I stay here. When I go, I do not want to take this beast with me, not one more step. I know better than to call a thing good or bad. I won't say that hell is inappropriate. These detachment lessons are brilliant and burning. Who can sleep like this? These bursts of beasts in my blind reactions, belligerent and bombing around the space between that matte black pancake pavement gum and the fat lift face of light. I have been furious with this life for being so blatantly beautiful while I shake. The haunted shape of your vacancy out of the window of our bed sheets to release myself from wilting in the way you walk away. There is so much blood in me when I sleep, it pushes against my teeth. Waterfalls pound the rocks to paste. It tastes like smoked salt and thimble slits. Like boorish work from the bed sweats. How much hunger do you think you can feed a dying pig? Earth. Your dirty mother's aprons smeared in father's attacks and embroidered children who laughed while walking backwards, watching me try to catch up, watching me try to calm down, trying to sew my lips shut, double stitched horsehair and bar breath, startled by grief in our common thread. While I was eyeing the physics to needlepoint, it began to make astonishing sense. Moths, too eager for streetlights, so should not be in charge of sutures. Look at this goddamn mess. I constantly turn my pillow to feel the cool side on my neck. So the tar in these lungs will level, pave the way to safety, unfold my forehead to the ceiling, open letter to the victims of my bad behavior, dense venom gone unchecked in my music. I have been trying to stay composed, the lyrics to Candle Spit. Lately, I am a lonely country, waving landscape of flags. Across the consequences of intentional language, fireflies in prison jars, bald tires on ice, guardrails that will not go the distance, jungle gym bars, the only oily hands, Missoula got ugly, Mississippi kiss me, a howling rush of simians rising through the throat of a white boy begging to rearrange privilege so he can return to fitting in again. Safety is not my partner. Comfort did not grow up here, in daylight under the bed. All the anger I found in your maps, a kindness in the groove where I was gutted, a shovel shell of red lights in a tin can full of roads. My blood moves through me so fast, it splits us like a tuning fork. Fighter jet threaded through house fire, rolled in the flicker of an aerosol can, burst of boiled foam in the mattress where my head was supposed to rest. There was no rest when you lived here. Warm went from the whistle from a cold metal man. Sarah Healy, the ocean swimming mother of women with big feet. On the flip side of the front entrance to the cathedral off Basses Street in Petaluma, California, told me an old personal realization once that went something like this. The lesson will be repeated until you learn it. That's a good one. Buddy Wakefield's good. All right, I'm just going to read you one more today. I might read some more Buddy Wakefield in the future. I think I have some others of his books downstairs in my office. This one is called The End of the World Tour Party. This is one of my favorites. I really like this one a lot. When I'm reading Buddy Wakefield, it gets difficult for me at some points because I want to start spinning. I want to take like a few of his words and start spinning my own poems off them, which wouldn't be a bad idea. It's just not what I'm going to do today, but it's just, I get going on some of his poems and I just want to take some of his words and start weaving my own with them. So I think that's kind of the mark of a really good poem in some ways. I also want to say this though, Buddy Wakefield is a spoken word poet, so not all poets write to speak them necessarily. Most poets read unless they're really prevented by like lots of stage fright or something, but poets really need to read their work. But not all poetry is specifically written to be spoken out loud. Contrary-wise, poets whose primary mode of poeting is to be on stage, to be spoken word poets, that's when I'm reading their poems and I'm like, oh, I'm going to fly away and I'm going to start doing my own thing, which again wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing a person can do in the world. All right. This is called The End of the World Tour Party by Buddy Wakefield. What had begun on December 28th, 2013, when leaving and eventually selling my home while on the road, had now turned into the end of April 2015. Heavy drugs had worked their way into me. About 200 sex partners had too, thanks to my obsessive monitoring of hookup sites and Sweden. To feel redeemed in any aspect of my life, I quit drinking towards the end of tour. My way of coping had become so warped that when a man in Asheville, North Carolina, offered me a beer from his fridge days into our crystal meth binge, I told him I didn't drink. I stood there, jaw twisting off to the side of my skull, and I told him I didn't drink. The only time I found myself present and approaching happiness is when I was on stage. Pretty much your standard episode of VH1's Behind the Music. The downward spiral was excruciatingly unoriginal, but the pain was comprehensive. And the love I once had, the love I hadn't had a chance to make peace with leaving, was moving farther into the distance. And the greater the distance, the heavier the grief. I was desperate for reprieve and driven to find understanding. I could no longer sanely navigate the devastation. The only thing that made any real sense was knowing I'd be going to a Vipassana center immediately following tour, that dark, unholy bitch, please God meditation. The day of registration at the Southwest Vipassana Meditation Center in Kaufman, Texas, could not come fast enough. 16 months, 230 shows, Western US to Canada, to Australia, to Africa, to Europe, to UK, to Iceland, back to the Eastern US, the drive across the South, up the West Coast, back to Seattle for a show that dropped out last minute and cost me thousands. I sold the van in Seattle and flew south for 2 last shows before staggering into the open arms of Austin, where my friend Derek C. Brown owned a home in the country called Ranch Dressing. He was throwing the end of the world tour party for me. Family and friends from every angle will all be there in one place. I was terrified, an utterly open wound. My heart needed a hospital bed, away from the agoraphobia, all that sweat in my blood, my devil blood. I wanted to die. What party and why? There was my love. Where was my love? Did he really not come? Was he really gone? I started to drink again that night to get through the party without anyone seeing me. Got stoned. I was so out of my mind that I couldn't speak a lick of sense when the time came for me to get on the mic and acknowledge the guests. The embarrassment excruciating. My mom was watching. Please, Vipassana. 3 more days until Vipassana. 2 days before the Vipassana course, I got ripped on wine in Arlington, Texas, with my best friend from college, AJ, and I told him, when Eckhart Tolle was 29, he basically wanted to kill himself, experiencing almost unbearable suffering. Said, I cannot live with myself any longer. Then suddenly, bliss. His ignorance left the building. He walked around London parks in a state of bliss for the next 2 years. Then wrote a book called The Power of Now, which got translated into 50 languages. Oprah brought him on his own TV station. For as much as anyone who's suffering unbearably can, Eckhart got a free ride. AJ put his hand on my shoulder. Buddy, you know, you're not going to get a free ride, right? I probably will read you some more, buddy. I like that. I mean, I say, this is one of my favorites. It's like me talking about tarot cards. Oh, this is one of my favorites. This is one of my favorites. They're kind of all one of my favorites. But there's parts of this I relate to a lot, which is touring, which is a wonderful experience and also like otherworldly in some way. And when you get like, the road really gets to be your home. That's really very true. And all of these strange places get to be your home. And sometimes like settling down from that can feel more foreign than traveling constantly, and time dissolves, and it's easier to drink than it is to not drink, and it's easier to just kind of go with this flow that doesn't have times. It has dates. You have to be on stage at a certain time in a certain place on a certain day, but in between all of that, time and space really dissolve. And touring shows up in my dreams in these really wild ways too. Like I've actually never toured through Canada, but I had a dream just recently that I was touring Canada, and I was telling the person I was touring with, well, we're going to need to be on the other side of Canada, tomorrow. And in my dream, that was ultimately possible if she would just listen to what I was saying and take the route I was saying, which of course you can't drive across Canada in that amount of time. But in my dreams, things like that will collapse. Like I can be in St. Louis and like, oh, I'm supposed to be in Washington, D.C. And then in my dream, I'm just kind of magically there. Obviously, you can magically get places in dreams, but that's not exactly what I mean. Like touring can feel that way also, like a dream. Like I can get from here to there in this inhuman amount of time. And I kind of love the way touring mirrors in my dreams and seeps through my dreams like that. Anyway, Buddy Wakefield's one of many, and if he does decide to come out of poetry spoken word retirement and you get a chance to see him, go see him. He's a very healing force. Anyway, thank you for listening. It's a funny one.